great people and great campus. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, they've had a little few hard times in California. Well, the whole state.
Yeah.
And I was born in the East Bay of San Francisco. So, and then we moved out here when I was 10 years old. So, I've tried to live back there several times, and it's just like, just can't handle it. It was too much. It's a young person's state. Yeah.
I think I must be a little bit hard on it, but I'm concerned about it.
Well, if you like the beach, you'll love it. 'Cause that's where I spend all my time. Now, are you currently going to school here?
No, I graduated. I graduated Wittenberg. At
Wittenberg. Okay.
07.
And what was your major?
English and East Asian Studies. I was a double major.
East Asian Studies. Okay. Well, that's some combination there.
It is.
You know, you get along with my brother. He would, because he's very much into East Asian studies. In fact, he married somebody from Jakarta, which is no, it's not Jakarta. It's somewhere in Malaysia.
It's not quite my area.
Yeah, not quite my area either. Not my area of expertise. Although I did live in Japan for 3 years, and you'd think I would be more familiar with what's going on around there, but you know, I was 19, so I didn't care. Now, let's get back to this book. Now, in the characters, David and Red, what we don't get out of the first 18 pages is the character development. You know, because we see, you know, I get the feeling that Red might be better at what he's doing than, and may even enjoy it, being a soldier, and David is not as good, or is maybe not enjoying it as much. Now, do those roles change? Does something happen to him that fundamentally changes their life or their outlook, or do we see them in a different light? How do the two characters develop?
I think they progress somewhat naturally. The main thing that will happen in between, as far as the interaction goes between them, is that probably 15 to 20 pages after this, they get split up. In these 18 pages, you see David caring for the soldier Collins, and a little bit later on, he does the same for Red. Red gets injured, and David comes to the rescue again. And the lieutenant of their unit ships David out for combat medic infantry training.
Okay.
And Red is sent overseas, and so they're split up for about 4 months, and a great deal happens to Red in those 4 months. Probably the worst part of the war that he'll ever see happens while David is gone. And so David's pretty well sitting back reading books, learning how to save lives, and Red's fighting the hardest that he ever has. And so by the time they're brought back together, Red's seen quite a bit more than David has. He's a lot more jaded, not necessarily more ruthless, but he knows what he needs to do. Whereas David he's thrust back into it, and he begins a little bit lost, finds his footing again, but he can't keep up with the sort of soldier that Red has become.
All right. Well, and in the new book, you say it's almost entirely about Red.
It's all Red.
It's all Red. And just based on what you've said here, in the new book, does Red does he have a medical problem? I mean, is he suffering from post-traumatic stress? Is that part of his problem in the new book?
I'm sort of loath to diagnose him.
No,
but certainly his past follows him around. One of the main differences, I think, between Red and David, at least as far as I see, I like to think that anybody can take their views on the characters however they wish. But the way that I see them is that David is a much more conscious person. The way Red fights and the way that he interacts with the world is much more instinctive. And that's part of the reason why he's a much better soldier. When he comes back home, he deals with things in a very raw way. He fights, he drinks.
So things are for Red when he gets back are much more black and white than they are about compromise.
Yeah.
Which is what you probably have to do in a civilized society.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So he would have a harder time.
He does. He has a much harder time coping with civilian life. That's part of the problem that he has. Part of it, again, is that he has a hard time coping with the difference in existence between civilian life, where he comes back home and he mines for coal, and a day in, day out struggle where he's saving lives and taking lives, which he sees as, he has a moral impetus for that. There's a drive. Whereas the civilian life...
Right, by
he
fighting
doesn't have
a war,
anything.
I'm saving lives.
Right, and there's a much larger goal at work. And when he's back home, it's just himself. He doesn't know how to do anything with that. He's pretty aimless at that point.
Now, well, I'm not going to try and diagnose him either, but it does sound like it's very similar to what a lot of even Korean, and these guys they're getting up there. I mean, the young ones are in their 70s, and a lot of them came back, and it was a much different world then. I mean, when they came back, they were more welcomed.
Yeah.
Your characters come back from a war where they weren't welcomed. So that's probably plays a little bit on the condition that Red finds himself in.
Yeah, it certainly does. I don't put a whole lot of emphasis on location or time, and that's one of the reasons why I got rejected from the Amazon contest. In my head, at least, it's a little bit in the future. And not only are
So
they
it
not-
really doesn't need to be it's not a Vietnam War.
No.
It's a war,
the fact that they're in Vietnam is just
incidental.
it is. It's incidental, and I know
It could have been
it's
it could be a
but
future war in Vietnam.
It is. I never want to say that it's World War III because that draws certain connotations. But it is. It's World War III. Something happens to America. Someone invades. There's a short war at home that you see a little bit of that Red and David fight in, and then America decides to take the war everywhere else, quite literally.
Okay.
It's something that I don't discuss at all in the book. It's something that could be, again, one of the main weaknesses. People weren't able to draw that sort of conclusion from it. But the way that I wanted it to be was that America goes after everything without politics messing with the novel itself, leaving a world that its population is halved, its technology is thrown back, and it's not necessarily a simpler time, but it's one reminiscent of the sort of archetypal age that you probably place somewhere in the 30s to 50s.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for being on the program.
Well, thank you for having me.
And good luck with the book, and